Wilson! Wilson! I'm sorry!
Those were up, and they did.
More smarts, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for a 2000 film directed by Robert Zemeckis and starring Tom Hanks. And I think this was probably one of the last good live action films Robert Zemeckis did before he went on to the motion capture industry. And that film is going to be for none other than 2000's phenomenal gem, Cast Away. His other collaboration he did with Tom Hanks after Forrest Gump. So what's the plot of this movie? Well, Memphis-based FedEx operations executive Chuck Nolan and grad student Kelly Fleurs have long dated and lived together, and despite each being the love of the other's life, have not gotten married because of their respective busy schedules, especially Chuck's, as he is more often on business trips than he is at home. That martial status changes when on Christmas Day 1995, as Chuck is rushing off to catch yet another FedEx plane for a business trip, he gives Kelly a ring. That flight then somehow experiences technical difficulties and goes down somewhere in the South Pacific. In a life raft, a relatively unharmed Chuck washes up on shore that what he will learn is a deserted island. He unaware of what has happened to any of his fellow flightmates or the plane. However, several of the packages on board for delivery do wash up on shore with him, those packages which he initially treats with respect. Chuck realizes that his priority is survival, which primarily means food, water, shelter, and fire, and rescue. But survival is also in an emotional sense. To fulfill that emotional need, he has a heirloom pocket with Kelly's photo that she gave him as a Christmas present, and eventually opening the FedEx packages, a Wilson volleyball on which he paints a face, and which he names Wilson. And as time progresses, Chuck goes through a range of emotions, but if rescue is ever in the cards, he realizes he has to find a way to get off the island, which is seemingly impossible in this circumstance due to the strong onshore surf he cannot get beyond without assistance. And what Chuck may not fully realize is the longer he is not rescued, the harder it will be for him to return to his old life in its entirety if he ever is rescued. Although the thought of Kelly is what largely keeps him motivated to be rescued, Kelly, who probably believes him to be dead, may have moved on emotionally from him in the intervening time. So anyway, how was this film made? Well, the film was obviously not shot chronologically. It began on January 18th, 1999 before halting 2 months later. Filming then resumed on April 3rd, 2000, and finished the following month. Hanks even gained 50 pounds during pre-production for the purpose of making his transformation more dramatic. After most of the film was shot, production was paused so he could lose the weight and grow his hair and beard to look like he had been living on that island for years. Another 4-month production had preceded the filming of the return scenes, and during the year-long hiatus, Zemeckis used the same film crew to make another film, What Lies Beneath, and while the film was in production, Hanks nearly died when he suffered an infected cut on his leg. He was rushed to a local hospital to undergo surgery and stayed there for 3 days. Filming of Cast Away is even suspended for 3 weeks to allow Hanks to recover from the injury. And Cast Away was filmed on Monariki, one of the Mamakan Islands in Fiji. It is a subgroup of the Mamakan archipelago, which is sited off the coast of Vitalivu, Fiji's largest island. The island even became a tourist attraction after the film was released. After Chuck's return, it is identified by Kelly as being about 600 miles south of the Crook Islands. There is no land between the southernmost Cook Islands and Mangaia and Antarctica. And the film begins and ends in the same location on the Arlington Ranch in the Texas Panhandle south of the city of Canadian Texas. The film's minimal score was composed and conducted by Alan Silverstreif, for which he won a Grammy Award in 2002. And the film's soundtrack is most notable for its lack of score and creature sound effects, such as birdsong or insect sounds while Chuck is on the island, which is intended to reinforce the feeling of isolation. Cast Away even contains no original music score until Chuck escapes the island. However, there is this Russian choral piece heard near the start of the film that was not composed or ever recorded by Silverstrike, so it does not appear on the film's soundtrack list, because it is a traditional Russian song written by Lev Nipper called Oh My Field, and is often available on various collections of the Red Army hymns. So, after the film was shot and marketed, Castaway would go on to be released into theaters on December 22nd, 2000 by 20th Century Fox in North America and DreamWorks Pictures in its international markets. At the box office, it grossed $429 million worldwide and became the third highest grossing film of 2000. The film received even generally positive reviews from critics who praised the screenplay, Hank's performance, for which he won the Best Actor, Motion Picture Drama at the 58th Golden Globe Awards, and nominated for Best Actor at the 73rd Academy Awards. Now, as for my reaction, well, I have to think this is one of Robert Zemeckis' best movies, and probably his last good live-action movie in my opinion. I liked this movie, but I can't say the same for the reviews found on this website, like far too many of these fall into two categories. Those who thought the movie was a Crusoe-like story of survival and loved it, and those who thought the film was an ad for FedEx and hated it, but the movie is neither about man against nature nor about FedEx. Castaway is purely about love, about the difficulty of finding in a world obsessed with success, about the freakish accidents that can produce or destroy it, about an ordeal that led one man to rethink what is meaningful life, and about the need to bring to the pursuit of love the same resourcefulness and courage that enabled a hero to survive on an island for 5 years. Tom Hanks is really superb as Chuck Noland, creating immensely sympathy for an ordinary guy trapped not against his will in a job that is eating him alive. How many actors could have made Nolan's attachment to Wilson believable? Yet Hanks does that exactly. The last section of the film, much reviled by many, is immensely touching. Like, Nolan has survived 5 years of utter isolation, hoping to be reunited with his fiancée, and has resigned himself to death at least a few times before he's miraculously rescued. Anyone who remains dried-eyed during his meeting with Kelly, and their rich feelings are both acknowledged and to be necessity abandoned, is unworthy of being allowed in the theater to see a film of such quality as this one. And what I really stop and think about, the film is brilliantly executed. The scenery is absolutely breathtaking. The special effects are so well done that you don't even realize that there are special effects present. And it seems to be a trademark of Robert Zemeckis. The acting is very good, and there's only really two real sources of acting in this film, like Tom Hanks and Helen Hunt. The rest of the cast is good, but their roles are very minor. Tom Hanks just pulls off another great performance as usual, and you really can feel all of his emotions while he's stuck on the island. Also, not many actors have changed their physical appearance like Tom Hanks did for this film. I truly applaud him for this work, and I firmly believe that Tom Hanks kind of deserved the Oscar most of 2000. I haven't seen Gladiator, guys, so I can't say much about that. Helen Hunt also pulls off a pretty nice performance. There's even a good deal of comedy in the film, and it's done very well, and it's perfectly balanced, and it doesn't overly ruin these serious moments of the film. Sure, some may criticize Castaway for having an unsatisfying ending, but it's understandable as to why it's polarizing. Why it is seen as inconclusive and depressing to some wanting something happy. Count me in as somebody I honestly found the ending incredibly powerful, and who cannot fail to tear up at the end. Sure, I'm kind of a little picky about some downer endings or unsatisfying endings, but here I feel like this was kind of the only way to go. I think you could only end this story on a more downbeat ending than happy. I don't think a happy ending would have worked for a story like this, to be fair. They kind of did it a little more realistic with this one. There's just so many great things about Castaway that help it make it quite a superb film. Zemeckis' direction is some of his boldest. There's some courageous risks taken, like his use of camera work, and done in an ingenious way and not overdone. Even better as Hanks' one for the ages almost one-man show performance, and sometimes not saying much but expressing a lot in a nuanced way. He is instrumental in making the island that has resilience and struggling to survive riveting viewing, and he does so phenomenally. It's even a very well-made film too. Beautifully and clever photographed, atmospherically lit, and with a lovingly created island setting. They blend so well with the film's tone and with its boldness. The score avoids from being overwrought, and while there is beautifully constructed script that provokes a lot of thought and a wide range of emotions. While deliberately paced, the story is an engrossing one, with an excellent heroic plane clash in the very telling section on the island. That to me didn't drag at all, even with events being a little on the slight side. Plus, there are many times when you feel so much for a volleyball. You do hear, it's a very, easily, you really get this sad moments where after Hanks' character, or Chuck, escapes the island with the volleyball Wilson, He names his volleyball Wilson. He paints a face on it. He finally gets a raft and he finally manages to get off the island. But then suddenly a big bunch of wave storm approaches, smashes kind of into his raft, and once he does get back up, he sees the volleyballs washed away, and he's calling out for it. Like, normally, that would be seen as kind of a gnarly moment, but here, it's a very well done, heartbreaking moment there. That's kind of the one thing that's kind of kept his sanity on that island for 4 years. And you can really feel when he loses his ball. And Castaway is just an outstanding film, one of the great survivalist tales you'll ever see. Robert Zemeckis' direction was never so astute and intelligent. Before we get on to the island, though, there's plenty of scenes of the plane crash and Chuck's valiant voyage in his rubber dinghy. The crash is a tour de force of action and effects work. Zemeckis shoots it in a series of frenzied camera angles and jolting close-ups. It's even a startling scene, and affecting for its suddenness. The scene where Chuck nearly gets shredded by an out-of-control engine turbine stays in the memory and doesn't easily fade, only for Zemeckis to outdo himself by staging the equally striking scenes of Chuck and his boat, caught in for the ravages of a fierce thunderstorm, and it's a brutal scene of frightening imagery, and a scene of almost complete darkness, illuminated only by flashings of lightning, highlighting the tiny speck of dust and his boat of Chuck, and his boat in the vast ocean. But it's when we get to the island that Castaway really opens up. Zemeckis' direction is clipped and concise. He never shows us more than what we need and want to see. The film goes through the motions of Chuck's trials and tribulations. There's almost a terrifying immediacy to these scenes. Some of them are only about 10 seconds in length, like the interconnected vignettes. And Chuck writing help in the sand, shouting for help to no one in particular, spending his first night on the island surrounded by the sounds of crashing waves and bird calls, exploring the summit of the island, gathering washed-up FedEx packages for supplies, and cracking open a coconut, something that takes like a very, very, very long time, fishing, sheltering in caves, cutting himself, bleeding, and the monumental feeling of ecstasy of Chuck feels when he makes a fire for the first time. And Tom Hanks really turns in one of his finest performances here. This was certainly one of his best roles yet. What makes his performance all the more impressive is it's almost in complete silence, which makes his isolation seem even more potent and poignant, and a little eerie too. Zemeckis also comes up with an unusual method to draw Chuck's slowly unraveling mental state. A volleyball that's washed ashore too, a volleyball Chuck names Wilson. It becomes like a character in the story. It's Chuck's only companion, and he feels affection for this inanimate object, and you seem to kind of find that you even will too. The camera work is also outstanding. There are many shots that last much longer than the average take in a movie, and while they do kind of annoy me a bit at first, I go on to love them. The pans that can take a minute long really add to the realism, and just lets you take in the situation the main character is in. The effects are pretty good too. Sometimes the porta potty sale glow looks kind of funny, but for the most part it's solid. And Zemeckis nailed it with how this film was put together, and the camera crew did amazing too. The story even comes off outlandish, but in the end it seems realistic. I even found that chances of Nolan actually surviving a plane crash, then stumbling upon an unoccupied island slim to none, but hey, it wouldn't be like the show Lost, where they apparently just crash onto an island and like 20 or so people survive. And I do adore the ending. It shows that the movie will take risks, and that it's willing to vary from the crowd. Some people might say the movie is depressing, but it's a perfect balance for me. We see a whole bunch of sad dramatic stuff, so when the happy funny moments come around, it makes them all the more enjoyable. This, simply put, is just a movie about time. It's a movie about the emotions that time evokes on any ordinary human being, and you feel like you were in the movie and can relate to the characters and the story. Whether it is the deserted island, the romance, or the job, you feel like Tom Hanks' character, Chuck Noland. The one aspect of just director Rob Zemeckis in general, his films, that I think are perfect are how he uses metaphor to tell a story. In this film, there's a beginning and an end, and they are both perfect and complement one another. It's hard to even believe that a film can make the viewer relate to such a long period of time in 2.5 hours. But Zemeckis does it with this movie just like he did with an earlier classic called Forrest Gump. However, I guess there would be some bad qualities with the film though, sadly. One thing that did annoy me on the island is kind of the pacing. Sometimes it did feel rushed, and some scenes barely lasting a minute, not giving you enough time to let it sink in. Like, if Zemeckis had cut some shorter scenes out, allowing more time for more meaningful scenes, it wouldn't have been too huge of an issue. He does get the loneliness right, but it all goes out by a bit quickly, and not giving you the feeling of a long amount of time you spent on the island. And when other people are on screen besides his Chuck and Helen Hunt's characters, the film does seem to be at fault. It's nothing bad, but it just loses its strength, particularly in the end. I just felt quite empty at the... I feel like we don't see much of what happened to Chuck after he got back from the island. Here. And honestly, I do wish we kind of see a little more of Helen Hunt's relationship with Hank's character. I mean, it was well played to start with, but then it just falls flat as it progresses. And a part of me does also wish their relationship had a happy ending, but life's not a happy ending, and I feel like, once again, I just feel like the tragic ending kind of did work here. Because, so yeah, the downer ending's not going to ruin the movie for me, and I still find this movie to be a masterpiece despite some little nitpicks I have here. I think Castaway is just a phenomenal movie as well, and easily probably my favorite movie of 2000. In the end, Castaway is one of Zemeckis' greatest work and the last good live-action film he did, in my opinion. This is definitely worth a watch and buy for sure, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Castaway, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you love Zemeckis or Hanks' works, then please give this a watch and buy this movie for your collection for sure, because it is such an iconic masterpiece. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Castaway, I'm going to give Castaway a 10 out of 10. There we go! That wraps up my review for Castaway. So, next week I'll be filming the Age of Ultron review, and then the week after that I'll be filming the Ant-Man review to complete the review series for Phase 2, But next week, man, next week I'm probably also going to be reviewing some movies I'm seeing this weekend, as 2 new releases have come out. So yeah, it'll be an interesting week next week. But until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank y'all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, and don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.